At 2:44 a.m. on June 17, 2025, Tel Aviv's air raid sirens sliced through the silence like a blade. Two ballistic missiles, likely Birkin variants, had just launched from Houthi-held Yemen, flying nearly 1,700 kilometers toward Israeli territory. One was aimed at Jaffa. The other skimmed dangerously close to Ben Gurion Airport. Windows rattled, families sprinted to shelters, and the city held its breath. This wasn't a test. It was a deliberate long-range strike, timed, precise, and calculated to send a message. The Iran-backed Houthi rebels made their move under the cover of a ceasefire agreement, but not with Israel. The ceasefire was with the United States. High above the region, U.S. AWACS and ISR aircraft were already in the air. Below them, F-15s, F-16s, and F-A-18 Super Hornets waited, armed, fueled, and watching. They weren't attacked, but they didn't fire either. Because the Houthis hadn't struck U.S. forces. They'd done something else just as bold. They had fired within reach, near U.S. jets, near a U.S. ally. And that was enough. Because when missiles come screaming past your fighters and slam into your partner's doorstep, that's not restraint, that's a dare, and it demands an answer. That dawn, U.S. and regional military command centers sprang into focused activity. The missiles hadn't violated American airspace, but they crossed a line. Since the ceasefire on May 6, 2025, the Houthis had agreed to halt all strikes on U.S. naval and commercial vessels in the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Israel, however, was untouched by that promise. In the last few weeks, military intelligence has flagged at least 5 ballistic missile launches by the Houthis aimed at Israel. It wasn't stopped. It wasn't even fully noticed until now. Each launch chipped away at the fragile truce. And the June 17 strike was different. It was larger, better targeted, and carried a clear strategic goal. U.S. intelligence analysts noted that these missiles weren't off the cuff. They followed rehearsed trajectories, long range, precise, and timed to strike outside immediate conflict zones. The Houthis knew U.S. jets were in the sky. They also knew that this strike would force Washington into a dilemma: speak up or stand down. Meanwhile, U.S. forces in the region remained on alert. The aircraft carrier strike group in the Red Sea, along with U.S. Air Force assets in Qatar and the UAE, were already coordinating joint missions to monitor any further movement. Commander-level discussions quickly kicked off with allies: how to support Israel, maintain deterrence, and do it without lighting a wider flame. As dawn broke over the Red Sea, American air power didn't flinch. It hardened its stance. No shots were fired, but every pilot, crew chief, and mission planner knew that the situation had shifted. Across carrier decks, forward bases in Qatar and the UAE, and quick launch shelters in Djibouti, F-15 Strike Eagles, F-16s, and Super Hornets stood armed, fueled, and waiting. They hadn't launched. They didn't need to. But they were visible, circling, tracking, present. Command centers updated readiness protocols. The order was clear: maintain defensive posture, prepare for rapid response, and monitor every square mile of launch territory. It wasn't officially a no-fly zone, but the message was the same. Weapons were live. AIM-120 AMRAAMs, AIM-9X Sidewinders, and precision-guided bombs were locked in place. The sky was tense, quiet, but volatile. High above, U.S. AWACS aircraft and ISR drones pieced together a live tactical map stretching from Yemen to central Israel. That feed flowed directly to Israeli air defense and U.S. regional commands. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, American pilots trained for what might come next: intercept missions, strike authorizations, and split-second retaliatory paths. But there was no official response, but everything was in motion. The senior defensive official said it plainly: "We didn't fire, but if this continues, we will." One more launch, one more miscalculation, and that's all it would take. And this time, the U.S. wouldn't be watching. They'd be flying alongside Israel, not behind it. No red lines were crossed that morning, but America made sure that everyone saw exactly where they were. The Houthis knew exactly what they were doing. By firing toward Israel, but not at U.S. assets, they exploited a legal and diplomatic blind spot. The ceasefire signed with Washington on May 6th had one glaring omission. It didn't cover Israel. On paper, it was clever. Technically, they hadn't broken their deal with the U.S. But in practice, they lit a match next to a fuel tank. Because when a close U.S. ally is under missile fire and American fighter jets are already airborne, that's not a loophole, that's provocation. And provocation without precision? Well, that's a gamble. The Houthis likely counted on U.S. hesitation, assuming Washington would hold back to avoid escalation. But every ripple from that launch raced through Allied military channels. It forced planners to revisit the rules of engagement. It made commanders redraw the lines of threat proximity, and it put U.S. credibility in the crosshairs, because silence now could look like surrender. To American strategists, this wasn't just another rocket volley. It was a signal, a move on the board. And moves have consequences. Worse still, the timing. With regional tensions already high and U.S. assets deployed from the Mediterranean to the Gulf, the strike didn't happen in a vacuum. It landed in a room already full of warplanes, satellites, and possibilities. And if the Houthis thought they'd calculated this one perfectly, they might want to run the numbers again. In the hours that followed, Israel didn't wait. By midday, retaliatory airstrikes were already underway. Israeli fighter jets reportedly struck radar installations and missile infrastructure deep in Houthi-controlled western Yemen. These weren't symbolic hits, they were strategic. Launch sites, command nodes, fuel depots, the kind of targets that mattered. And with every explosion, one question echoed louder in Washington. What happens if the Houthis fire back? Officially, the United States was still honoring the ceasefire. But unofficially, its jets were now flying alongside a country under active attack, sharing targeting data in real time. The line between observer and participant was getting thinner by the hour. U.S. aircraft maintained overwatch, but the mission brief had changed. Rules of engagement were under urgent review. Commanders debated scenarios. What if a retaliatory missile goes off course? What if an American asset gets locked onto, accidentally or not? What if a drone swarm hits an Israeli vessel, while a U.S. destroyer is in its formation? This is how wars don't start, but spread, one ambiguity at a time. Behind closed doors, military planners work the chain reactions. If U.S. fighters strike back, will Iran respond? Would Hezbollah open a northern front? Would the Red Sea become an aerial battlefield instead of a maritime choke point? And what about deterrence? Because if the Houthis can fire ballistic missiles across 1,700 kilometers under the protection of a ceasefire and walk away untouched, what message does that send? To Jordan, to Saudi Arabia, to Tehran, to Moscow? Even silence has a volume. And after June 17th, that silence was starting to sound a lot like permission. The U.S. hadn't fired a shot. But the next move wouldn't be quiet. Major Alex Green had flown dozens of sorties over the Red Sea. Fast, clean, professional runs. But June 17th felt different. He was already in the air hours before the sirens blared in Tel Aviv. His HUD lit up with the data. Missile arcs, trajectory lines, impact estimates, glowing threads of danger crawling across the screen. And still, no launch order. We're up there, Green later recalled. We saw it unfold and we held. For a fighter pilot trained to engage threats in split seconds, restraint is the hardest maneuver. Green and his wingmen tracked the missiles in real time, calculating intercepts, watching Israel's Iron Dome light up the sky. Then came the retaliation. Israeli jets surged into Yemeni airspace. Satellite feeds showed the strikes, smoke columns, impact zones. And Green, still airborne, still watching, still holding. People think the hard part is pulling the trigger, he said, but sometimes not pulling it, that's what sticks with you. When his Super Hornet finally touched down on the carrier deck that night, Green knew this wasn't over. The Houthis had tested the edge. They weren't done. And next time, the missile might hit, and the jets won't hold back. So he rearmed, same hangar, same aircraft, but a very different question in the air. What happens when the next launch leaves no room to wait? What do you think? Was this a one-time gamble by the Houthis, or the start of a new air conflict in the Middle East? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. And hey, if you found this video informative, intense, or just straight up important, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you think. And if you want to go a step further and support the channel directly, join the fleet. You get loyalty badges, priority replies, and you help us bring more true maritime and military stories to the surface. Just hit that join button on our channel page and get on board. Thanks for watching, stay sharp, and we'll see you in the next mission.